Hello, you sinister super shinobis, my name is TV Sky, and good lord, is it that time of year again already? Are we having the Dark Souls and difficulty modes discussion again? I guess technically this time it's about Sekiro, but trust me, it's really about Dark Souls, and we've been having this conversation year after year after year, and it's gone over and over and over again, and it never seems to go anywhere, and usually I don't like to get in the middle of the whole should Dark Souls have a difficulty mode discussion because generally I'm of the opinion that I don't really give a damn if a game has a harder or an easier difficulty mode, whatever. I'll just take whichever one works for me and play that one and not give a damn about what anyone else is doing with their time. This time around, though, I am going to get in the middle of it because there's some misconceptions going around that I would like to try and at least help clear up a little bit, because these misconceptions are causing a lot of people to talk past each other. People are coming to the conversation with some very different understandings of the subject at hand, and they're not quite understanding that the person that they're discussing things with might have a completely different perspective on what the thing means. So let's talk about easy modes and accessibility options. A major argument that a lot of people use against the idea of putting a difficulty slider in any of the FromSoft games is that a major component of FromSoft game design is difficulty. It's supposed to be very hard. It's supposed to be frustrating. It's supposed to take a lot of effort and a lot of dedication to overcome the challenges that the game puts in front of you, and your catharsis, your pleasure in playing the game comes from that slow learning process of working your way up, of grinding your way through, of figuring the game out, of learning your opponent's patterns, of working your way around it. And I don't disagree with that at all. I do think that difficulty is a major part of a Soulsborne game. But where the disconnect happens is when people start talking about putting an easy mode into a game like Sekiro Shadows Die Twice as an accessibility option to help people who would not otherwise be able to play the game get access to the game and its experience. Now, the people who don't like the idea of putting any kind of lower difficulty setting in Soulsborne games get annoyed by this because it seems to be suggesting that you've got a bunch of people who just don't want to put in the effort of learning the game, who don't want to put in the effort of engaging with the game the way it was designed, that they are being disrespectful to the design vision of FromSoft, and they're being entitled by demanding that everything be handed to them on a silver platter, and they don't want to face the least bit of difficulty in getting to the thing that they want. And that is the disconnect. The disconnect happens when we talk about accessibility options as convenience options. And this is something that I've seen on both sides of the conversation. I've seen people arguing in favor of the idea of a difficulty slider or some kind of easy mode, argue from the position of it would make it easier for people who aren't as good at video games, or people who get easily frustrated or who don't want to be stressed out, to be able to play games like Sekiro or Dark Souls without having to put in like the monstrous amount of time and hours and, concentration and attention that it takes to get good enough to get through those games. And on both sides of the conversation, this video is about urging all of us to please stop talking about and thinking about accessibility in those terms, because accessibility is not a matter of convenience. Accessibility is about extending the ability to play a video game to as many people as possible. A difficulty slider can be one part of an effort to make a game more accessible, but it is not the whole of the effort to make a game more accessible, and in fact, lots of accessibility options don't have to have any impact on the difficulty of the game whatsoever. To give you an example, depending on which statistics you look at, something like 1 in 12 men have some form of color blindness. This means that if certain colors are in close proximity or overlaid on top of each other, certain people physically are not able to tell them apart or even see that they are meant to be different shades of color. So if you have a video game, for example, that signals, oh, this thing is about to happen, you need to react to it by using a special color, if that color is close to another color that a colorblind person can't distinguish between, they become physically unable to read the signal that the game is sending to them. They become physically unable to play the game correctly, not because they're bad, not because they're not putting in the effort, but because they are literally unable to perceive the information that the game is trying to give them. Colorblind modes exist in a number of video games to ensure that players who have certain kinds of colorblindness will be able to read the information that the game is providing them and play the game the way it was meant to be played. It simply enables them to play the game correctly. Difficulty modes can be one part of making a game more accessible to people with certain kinds of disabilities, but they are not the end-all be-all, and they are not there to make the game more convenient or less authentic. In fact, In a number of the conversations that I've seen around accessibility in gaming, just putting an easy mode into the game is often spoken about as a little bit of a cop-out solution, as a little bit of taking the easy way out without actually addressing the issue at hand. Making an easy mode in a video game, yes, it makes more people who have certain kinds of disabilities probably able to complete it, but it doesn't necessarily give them access to the full experience of the video game. Say, for example, that all this happened to you is that you have lost a finger on one of your hands, and because you've lost your finger, you're not able to input the same button combinations that everybody else would be able to, naturally having all 5 of their digits. Now, you don't need the entire video game to be taken down a notch, like every enemy to be way easy and you to do double damage and you get more healing items and stuff like that to make the game's experience accessible to you. You might just need the ability to remap some buttons to create a button configuration that's more comfortable for the way that you have to hold the controller in order to compensate for your lost finger. Similarly, if you suffer from very severe dyslexia, what you need isn't for the entire video game to be made easier by 2 or 3 whole steps in order for you to complete it. What you need is something that helps you read text easier. Maybe a text-to-speech option, the ability to increase text size, the ability to make text boxes stay on screen longer and not just kind of disappear automatically. Those are the options that will make the game more accessible to you, but they have absolutely no effect on the difficulty. All this being said, there are absolutely times where adjusting the, air quotes, objective difficulty of the video game can be necessary as part of an effort to make the game accessible. It can, for example, be helpful for people with cognitive disabilities or people who are, because of their physical condition, forced to use input methods that simply cannot be as fast as traditional input methods. For example, if they use the adaptive Xbox game controller or a breathing tube or control a cursor on a video game screen with their eyes. But again, the mistake we make is thinking of these difficulty options as easy mode, because it's not easy mode. Even with the difficulty turned down, people who have certain kinds of disabilities will still find the game really hard and frustrating to complete. It's not an easy mode, it's just a normal mode from a different perspective. And I know that that can feel kind of hard to swallow, because it's really easy to go, well, hang on, wait a minute, once you put those options in, people are gonna use them. Like, someone is gonna go, oh, this game is too difficult, I don't want to actually put in the effort, I'll just turn on this accessibility option so I don't have to actually be challenged by it. Couldn't someone who's just lazy and dumb and entitled and unwilling to actually engage with the video game properly turn on those options and play through the game anyway, essentially cheating their way to victory? To which I say, yeah, sure, that's absolutely going to happen, but who cares? That's a them problem. Is it really fair to punish disabled gamers who just want to play the same game as everybody else on equitable terms just because some people might abuse them? I don't think so. Now, I've been seeing the sentiment go around that video games shouldn't have to bend over backwards to accommodate for people who have been in some kind of a tragic accident. Like, it's sad for them, but like, if you've lost your arms, then you can't play video games anymore. That's just what happens sometimes. The world is cruel, tough titty. Play some board games instead, take up painting, there's lots of other stuff you can do even if you can't play video games. FromSoft shouldn't have to change their design just because of a few people who might not be able to play their video game, and it shouldn't be on the rest of us to sacrifice the best possible version of the video games we love just because something sad happened to someone else one time. Like, how is that any of our concern? The world is big, bad stuff happens, and it's not fair to ask everybody else to make sacrifices and accommodations just because of that. And if that's your line of thinking, or anything close to it is your line of thinking, or even some milder version of it, I don't know how to argue with that. I really don't. I don't know how to reach you. I don't know how to talk to you. I don't know how to explain why it is good to give people who are disabled in some way more access to all the experiences that the rest of us get to have. Whether that's in the form of colorblind modes, or button remapping, or FOV sliders for people who get motion sick, or in the form of a difficulty option for a video game where having a difficulty option is somewhat incongruent with the narrative and mechanical thematics of the work as a whole. Anyway, to try to return to the point that I was attempting to make for this entire video, difficulty options and accessibility options are not the same thing. Accessibility options can include difficulty options, but they don't have to, and including difficulty in accessibility doesn't mean you have to compromise the vision or the balance intent of the original developers. It is entirely possible to have a video game like Sekiro retain its vision of being a difficult, frustrating, very exacting experience, while also making it accessible to people who otherwise aren't able to play the video game. When we muddy the waters by conflating accessibility and difficulty at every turn, we give people the false impression that accessibility options are about giving lazy players a free ride, and we make it harder for people who are doing research and having very important conversations about how video games can be made more accessible to more people to have those conversations without immediately being overrun with accusations that they're trying to ruin video games by destroying all challenge and destroying all individual artistic creativity and expression. Sekiro doesn't need an easy mode. Difficulty is core to the experience of Sekiro, but I believe that Sekiro would be a better video game if the ability to experience those difficulties were available to more people. Accessibility and challenge are not opposites. When we talk about them as opposites, we ruin the entire conversation. Anyway, that's enough from me on my soapbox. Thank you very much for watching. Like, comment, subscribe if you are so inclined. I have a Patreon, yada yada. I don't want to advertise too much on this video. Have a nice day, everybody.